So let's talk about it. Obviously, exercise 3, Team B, is a little bit easier and definitely more familiar as you guys just had exercise 1 and 2. This next exercise will begin our first project for the course. We will begin with simple abstract diagramming to start to understand the iteration ability of the software and how it can be applied to Studio. The final will become a project worthy of portfolio with a process and product, so be sure to save work constantly. Now it is pretty vague, and of course we will go through it, but abstract composition, I want you to create a 30 by 30 square frame to compose in 2D operations. Step 2, create a 5 by 5 grid system that references as center points 2D operations. Step 3, using 12 lines, 6 orthogonal planes, and 3 curved lines and 3 points, I want you to compose an abstract diagram. So again, if you've taken Chronodal, you know exactly what I mean. He starts you off with a triangle, a circle, a square. It's the exact same project, guys, except I'm just giving you different elements to work with. How many of you took me for D1? Exact same project, except now there's just different requirements of point lines and planes. But essentially, an example, right? I want you to come up with some sort of composition. It could be artistic, it could be long, but it's got to stay within that 30 by 30 feet, right? That's basically the only requirement. Next, we want to turn it three-dimensional, so extrude and cap and offset thickness your lines, planes, and grid into a 30 by 30 by 50. Keep in mind, we are eventually making an observation tower, but actually what we're doing for exercise 3 is making an abstract model, right? We're just doing it in the span of a couple days rather than digesting it week by week. Step 5 and step 5 again, my bad, that's supposed to be a 6 obviously. Compose a 3D model abstraction. And of course step 6, I want you to make 3 of them, right? And of course I'll show you what I mean by there, because that sounds daunting, but what I mean is, well, you can make 1, change it, that's iteration 2. Change it again, that's number 3, right? So you don't necessarily have to start over. You could, if you wanted, to just make 3 absolutely different ideas, but you don't necessarily have to. The final for this one is 3 11 by 17s, showing those 3 iterations, one perspective and 1 plan view per sheet. And again, I'll show you exactly what I mean in part 1. This one does have a part 2, and we'll do part 2 on Monday, as you can see in our schedule. So a little bit different on this one. Obviously yesterday a work day, and of course assigning exercise 3 today. Obviously everybody's got a work day tomorrow, and no class on Thursday. We will have a major pinup check on Monday just for everybody, and of course working in class. And this one for you guys is actually due next Wednesday, so a little sooner than my A team, right? Keep in mind, it's a little bit less work, right? We're just modeling stuff, so not a big deal. But as you can see, we'll move on to stairs next Wednesday, stairs and ramps, and then we'll actually do those separately and we'll put them together. Right, so just to kind of give you a sense of where we're going with this, especially if you're my B team and you're definitely new to Rhino and this all just seems so foreign. So again, kind of want to break it down. But again, we're essentially making a 3D model, right? We're basically taking that 2D, extruding it, and making it 3D. So again, I'll of course model it as necessary. But let's get started and let's go into Rhino. We'll go right into exercise 3, and we'll start off with our basically 30 by 30 grid. So I'll hit rectangle, and I probably want to set up some layers. In fact, I would even start to label out some of the things that we're going to need. So like grid, I know I'm going to need one of those. I know I want some lines. I know I want some planes. I know I want some points, so on and so forth, right? Those 4, just about what we'll be using today. I like to color code them because I like color. It's way easier to see than not color. And it records better too. So, also don't use yellow because it'll constantly look like things are highlighted when they're not. Don't know who needs to hear that, but I definitely needed to hear it when I was a student. So, all right, we got some colors. So let's start off with some sort of grid information. I'm going to start off with that 30 by 30, so 30 feet by 30 feet. Awesome. In fact, I could even get started, and I don't know about you, but I kind of like to see how much I need to go left. So often I'll make all 3 iterations at first just to kind of get the ball rolling. It is a grid system, so it doesn't have to be congruent. In fact, I believe the instructions say create a 5x5 grid. Okay, that's it, right? It just needs to be 5x5, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Ooh, let's go back. So a couple things that we can do. I can explode anything and turn it into its simplest elements. I don't know if I've explained that yet, but yeah, you can essentially explode just about anything. Be very careful, because if something has 8,000 triangles, it will explode it into 8,000 triangles, and sometimes the computer doesn't want that, right? Also, they're very hard to select 8,000 items compared to selecting one. However, the next thing that we could do is a couple things. I can array something. So something I haven't shown you guys before is array tool. And basically this controls the amount that I want in a certain direction. So what I mean by that is, well, I may need 25 feet by 25 feet, and maybe I actually want these to all be congruent. So I don't know, let's see, maybe I do want them to be congruent. In the X direction, I want 5 of them. In the Y direction, I want 0 or just 1. And in, actually I think I did that wrong. We'll see. I don't know, in the Z direction, I want 25 of them, right? Not that I really do, but if you see what I mean right here, I could take a single point. I can make 5. Ooh, ooh. Yeah, I chose the wrong direction. Let's do Y. Try that again. So array, my X direction 1, my bad. Y direction 5, and Z direction, let's go with 10, because 50 was kind of a lot. We'll take that single point, and as you can see, I can immediately make a grid. See where I'm going with this? Now obviously I can hit enter, and voila, I have a grid system, right? Now that may be a little too much, right? And maybe I don't want something actually orthogonal, right? It's kind of the same exact spacing between each one. Maybe I actually want to get more fancy with the spices, but I don't want to rob you of any tools, right? So obviously, like I said before, and we'll say over and over again, there's 15 ways to do something, right? Another way to do it is simply copy it and go, well, I want one here, I want one there, here, and there. But what I mean is 5 openings. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Does that make sense, guys? So essentially 4 lines. If I wanted the same, I could take that, mirror it. Everybody knows you could take the catty corner and get a mirror. So maybe that's option grid 1. All right, let's try another grid, because, I mean, nobody said they had to be the same 3 iterations. I don't know, I want to explode this one. Maybe I do want something congruent. So I'm going to go ahead and divide. We'll divide it not into that many pieces. We'll divide it into 5 pieces. Sweet. So I could get actually congruent lines, right? So if I wanted to take that one, copy it, and basically just take each point, good. Maybe I want something kind of unique, where one is obviously congruent and maybe the other is not. Maybe I go to like a golden ratio, I don't know. So test some things out, right? And last but not least, well, why work harder when I can work smarter? Copy. I'm just going to change this one up, right? Let's take these 2, maybe over here. I'll take these 2. Sweet. So again, 3 compositions, simple, right? Not too shabby. Now I'm actually only going to work on one today for the sake of speed, but as you can imagine, I want to do this essentially kind of 3 times, right? So let's take our piece. It's looking pretty cool. The first thing that I want to do is compose, right? I mean, probably the best way to do that is in our top view. So I'm allowed, let's see, 12 lines, 6 orthogonal planes. Ooh, I get 3 curved lines and 3 points. I'm going to go with my points first. So I'm going to type in point, and I'm going to make sure I'm on my point layer. And I don't know, yeah, I'll make some points. After all, I'm just composing, right? I'm going to get some circles involved. I definitely like using my circles. I'm going to go with like planar information there. So let's go with a circle. And again, you don't have to obviously copy what I'm essentially doing, but let's see. There's some orthogonal planes. I can get a polyline involved. That's kind of sweet. and I just want to have some fun. Compose, compose. I don't know, this is kind of cool. Kind of like the juxtaposition of that. I can also use my smart tools. I don't know if I've actually talked about this yet, but Smart Track, when that is enabled, you can actually basically hover on a point and then move it, and you'll see like a little line that's trying to help you. You guys see that? Kind of hard to see. There it is. And it's going, hey, is that what you meant? Yeah. Especially if you want actually like a perfect square. And again, what's kind of nice is we can move these around, and maybe I can even make another kind of grid system out of there. Again, compose. Let's get some lines involved. So I can get a line in there. I don't know, that's looking pretty sweet. We'll get another line in there, why not? And it's kind of too close to that one, so. Could you please be louder with that ladder? Thank you. But again, compose, right? Come on. Anyway. In our case, it's looking a little heavy, so I'm going to kind of lighten it up. I do want some spaces involved, and refer to, obviously, maybe you'll hear myself or Chronodal in the back of your mind as you make these. But compose. Another thing, Polyline, one of my favorite tools, of course. Get fancy with the spices. And as you can imagine, eventually these will turn into walls of some kind. But I want to compose it, right? Now I do need 12 lines, but I'm not going to do all 12 lines today. Just for the sake of time, and clearly I'm going like rapid fire. So again, it doesn't have to be as messy as what I'm doing. And in fact, you could get really fancy with the spices, and you could start to do like a trim. So we can take these 2 lines, we can trim it, and get some kind of like off circles. That would actually count more as like a curve, so be careful, even though it kind of is started as an original geometry. But again, you got all the freedom in the world here, right? The next thing that we want to do, we got our grid, we got some lines, we got some planes. I may want to actually get a diagram out of it. Keep in mind, I do eventually need to show a plan view and a perspective view. So I don't know, it may be helpful to do this first, to basically take a copy and hatch it up, right? Give it some poche, give it some line weight. Now, not necessarily the lines themselves, you could kind of just look at it. Another thing that we can actually do is go to properties. So I don't normally show this, but you can control the scale of the line type. But usually the thickness of it requires a little bit more skill, and it is what it is. But you can technically change the line type, and those sometimes actually change their thickness. You can also change their scale, their color, their width, if you will. However, what really stinks is I'll change this to like 1, nothing happens. But what is kind of nice is when it gets into Illustrator, it'll go to 1 point. So I mean, I think by default it goes to 1 point. So again, nothing crazy here, but as you can see, I don't have exactly the tactile feedback or the haptics of like, oh, as soon as I change the thickness, it changes the thickness on Rhino, which is normally why I don't show it. But as soon as you actually go to like, say, printing, right, it'll actually change that thickness of the line, especially once I go to like a print color, right? Anyway, just wanted to show that just in case you're interested. But for the sake of making a diagram, I may want to hatch it. I may want to select boundary mode and actually go, well, I want that to be filled in. That's pretty interesting. Not too shabby. I'll apply. We'll do it again. Maybe I want that one to be pochade. I know some of you guys are like, I really could have used this in D1, right? But again, you can get fancy with the spices. After all, it's just an abstract diagram. But already, a lot of potential there. I could throw that into Illustrator and go ham on it, right? In terms of line weight and really get a nice abstract diagram along. However, from there, I need to turn it into a 3-dimensional item. So our next step after, of course, composing, and arguably I would say students probably take the longest on this. They get really fancy with the spices. They often take a little too long on making art rather than realizing, hey, we still got to make a 3D model, so be careful. I would set a timer for yourself and make a charrette right out of it. Give yourself 45 minutes each, see what you come up with, right? As soon as you start applying 3 hours to something, it's like, come on, bro, like, it's a bit too much. However, it is for your portfolio, so I'll let you, of course, decide. But we can do stuff like this, right? And very honestly, in the past, I've actually taken this one and turned it into our project, but I don't know, I've already done that, so just coming up with some new ideas. But let's turn it into a three-dimensional diagram. So we'll take a copy, because why not? I might mess up, and I definitely don't want to mess that up. So let's take a look at it. And in fact, I may want to actually hide the rest. That way it doesn't get in the way. So I'll hide it, and we'll just focus on this one. Sweet. First things first, I would recommend that we come up with a grid system first. That usually helps out a lot, and of course trying to visualize kind of the rest of things. And of course I put mine in layers, so I am good to go. I'll turn off the 3 that I didn't use. And let's work with this first. So we may need some columns. So let's get some columns. We can get fancy with the spices. We can go Mies van der Rohe on us, but we are going to build this. So I would suggest squares or circles, right? But if you want to get fancy with the spices, you can. I would suggest anywhere from a 6-inch to a 12-inch. That's it. Let's not have 2 foot by 2 foot columns, right? I mean, let's face it, that's really bad, right? And funny enough, actually, if you were to open that up, you'd realize that the column's actually only 1 by 1. So I don't know whose genius idea was like, yeah, let's make it 2 by 2 and just take up the entire room. Genius. Anyway, this is the stuff that you will totally fix as an architect, right? But in our radius, I'm going to choose 3 inches. That way I can get a 6 foot. And we'll go ahead and make a copy. We can take that center point or that intersection and quite literally copy it. Since this one's pretty congruent, I can take a copy of all of them. And I can quite literally copy that down. I don't really need some on the extents, but you could, you know, I mean, after all, it is a composition. And it's sculpture, guys, right? We're not actually making this into anything yet, but for our beginning, we'll start with sculpture. So I'm gonna get a little fancier with the spices, and we'll go with circles today. But these could easily be squares, or honestly, if you wanted to go Mies van der Rohe on us, you could use a polyline, right? And you can get, you guys know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about actually this project right here. Ooh. The one behind us. You guys notice these columns? They're like more like a plus sign. So if you wanted to get really fancy and, you know, go architectural, by all means you could, right? But at least for the sake of tutorial, I'll go with something simple like circles. In our case, I know that it needs to go at 50 feet, right? So let's set the standard. Let's go at 50 feet. You guys already know, extrude, curve, enter. Oh, maybe I didn't get them. I just want my circles though. So let's just get our circles. There we go. I guess I got more than circles. There we go. So I need to make my columns essentially, and I'll go with 50 feet, enter. Wonderful. All right, so we got something that it's at least gonna hold this thing up, but we need some beams. We need some, you know, some vertical, or sorry, some horizontal elements. In our case, I could use sweep tool, right? If I had one of those Mies van der Rohes, I could use a sweep tool and just profile it. I could use pipe, I could use sweep. Like I said, there's 15 options to do something. In my case, I'll go simple and go with a pipe. We'll do a radius of 3 inches to make that 6 inches total. And we're good to go. Right, we got our first one, but yeah, that looks kind of funny, just having columns on the floor. So this is actually a great instance to use filter, or at least explain it. So I just want my solid pieces, but as you can see, it's actually grabbing my lines as well. If I don't want it to grab my lines, in fact, I can go to my filter tool. By the way, the filter tool, you're gonna have to find it in Windows. I do not know where it is. I'm pretty sure it's at the bottom, but look for basically something that looks like a little funnel, and that is your filter tool. However, on the Mac, it is right next to your OSnap options. So, you found it?
Same exact place.
Awesome, fantastic. Good to know. In our case, this actually allows what can be selected. So for instance, if I only want poly surfaces, right, I could uncheck basically everything but poly surfaces, which is a little tedious. You know, no, it doesn't do the Adobe thing for us. But nicely enough, if I select these, it's only going to select my poly surfaces, which is great, right? And again, this is fantastic when you have 8,000 of something, right? So I'll take that piece, and as you can see, it didn't select those lines. Fantastic. How many of you guys have already run into the spot where you copy something and it's in the exact same spot like 5 times? Anybody? Be very careful. This is a great way to get rid of that, by the way, by just selecting one and deleting the rest that you don't need, right? In my case, I kind of want to establish some floors, if you will. Again, it's sculpture, so it's not really floors. But I'll take this piece, I'll copy it a couple times, you know, to kind of give this idea of sculpting. And again, just kind of establishing my grid first. And my gosh, I mean, can you imagine in Studio? We've already got our grid system, guys. How many of you guys are working in graphics too, right? And trying to come up with, you know, some sort of system. Hey, nobody said you can't come up with that system on the computer and then draw it, right? Now, don't be the smart guy, if you will, and print it out to scale and just trace it, because then you don't really learn a whole lot except maybe the technical skills of drafting. There's a lot to be said. Arguably, you're still using the same parts of your brain. You're having to think ahead and, of course, model ahead. And at least in one man's professional opinion, I find it really nice that I can just look at every single view instead of draw every single view. So, again, already a lot of potential there. Let's get to the rest of it and make sure we're on par for directions. All right, extrude, cap, offset thickness, your lines, your planes, your grid. So we definitely already got the grid of the 30 by 30 by 50. Let's work on to our planes, our lines, and of course thickness, extrude, and cap. I mean, that's pretty vague. Let's see what I mean by that. So if this is already getting in the way, you know, you might need to turn off the grids, right? And maybe switch to planes and turn off that grid for a second. Let's start working with some of this stuff. And as you can see, I immediately want to click on the line and my filter tool freaks out. Why? Because it's like, bro, those are curves you're clicking on. So very often I leave this actually disabled, right? That way I can, of course, click on something. In my case, let's start making some stuff. I'm going to go ahead and extrude. There's a couple of options when you extrude, by the way. So for instance, you can actually make it a solid object. So that's pretty nice. I don't have to cap everything every time I extrude something. You can also do both sides, which by the way is pretty cool too, right? So again, just kind of want to throw in some options, because boy is there a lot of options. And I don't know, I kind of want to get fancy with the spices. After all, you might have to think back to D1, D2, and just because you see something in one view doesn't mean I don't have thousands of them and that I'm simply just looking at one view. In fact, I really want you to actually start to play with that Z direction and make some sculpture. I mean, why not? I mean, it's kind of lame if it's just every time we look at the top, it's the exact same diagram. So now you get to decide what this looks like in elevation, right? Now, of course, in the video, you won't see all my hand gestures, but I can assure you I'm not a magician or a hypnotist, but I use my hands a lot. So let's get fancy with the spices. Maybe I use that array tool. I kind of want to get cool with it. So I'm going to go ahead and array, and I can array anything, by the way. I want to keep track of my direction, so I definitely want to do it in my Z direction. So I'm going to stick with X1. I'm going to go with Y1 because I kind of want it to be, you know, all in the same piece. Enter. And yeah, you know, actually I want 12 of them in the Z direction. I'm going to switch views real quick. I'm going to really select anywhere and get fancy. All right, enter. That looks pretty good. I'll turn on my grids to see if that turned out well. And my goodness, we're already cooking, chat. Look at that. We got rhythm. We got sculpture. Now, keep in mind, it will become an observation tower, but you don't have to get fickle yet, right? But if it's starting to look like too much, hey, delete to, right? Again, we can control that Z-axis, and again, it still looks the exact same from the top. Our diagram is still technically true. Let's keep going. Turn off that grid real quick. Let's get fancy with this. I'm going to go with a circle, and maybe I actually want walls, right? I don't necessarily want always a three-dimensional object, so I'm going to extrude. All right. You know, this time I'm going to go with the not solid option. And yeah, I want to go big or go home, right? I mean, shoot, we got some big items in there. It's looking pretty sweet. But right now, it's technically a two-dimensional surface. So you may have guessed it, offset surface. And we can actually control the thickness. We can make it offset out, or we can make it offset in. which one would be technically more true? In, right? Because we don't want to mess up that boundary, and we just want to turn it into a wall, right? So I'll click. In fact, I can click a million times. It's going to control that direction. And I'm going to control the distance. So I'm going to go with like a 6-inch wall. Enter. Oh, my bad. 6 inches. And enter again. And voila, we got a 6-inch wall. Now that's like hitting the ground pretty hard, so I kind of want that to float. And again, at the end of the day, I want to make some sculpture. Keep in mind, I can't really have like floating items. Eventually we'll 3D print these, we'll actually make them by hand. So we can't necessarily have something like this. Let me just give a bad example. We can't defy the laws of gravity. Actually, it's not a law, it's a theory. And there's like 80 different gravities, but that's another story. In our case, we can't have that, right? We need to connect it to something. So this is why I suggest make the grid first, right? That way there's kind of this intuitive like, hey, well that's connecting to here, that'll kind of hold that up, right? If you can kind of squint your eyes a little bit and imagine with me. But that's looking pretty dry at the end, so I don't know, I may want another one. I'm gonna copy it. One of my favorite tools of all time. When you copy, you got some options. You can copy it in the exact same place. So I'm gonna do that and just take a copy. This is where I can use my gumball tools and really start to play with the rhythms here. Alright, now we're getting fancy with the spices. We got some spatial components going on there, we got some space going on here. I love it. Alright, let's keep going. Now keep in mind, this is just for the sake of tutorial. You don't have to make it look like mine, right? Let's get some more. Let's see what we can do. We got an option here. That's pretty sweet. I kind of like that, but I bet we could do more. So I'm going to take that piece. I'm going to get fancy with my sweep tools. I don't know. I kind of want like the cool triangle wall. You know, I saw it on some architecture website, and you know, maybe I want to do the same thing. Of course, I want to choose the right view. I kind of want to get fancy with this one. I kind of want to have like a, I don't know, an interesting wall. I mean, that's looking pretty sweet. I do want to line up, and of course line up back to that original point. And as you can see, I chose the wrong point. That's okay. Let's try again. Take that same one. And maybe it's actually the left view. My bad. So let's get set view and go to the left. Whoop. There we go. But let's say I wanted a T. I don't know. Obviously, I'm just getting kind of funny with the spices. But I could use my sweep tool instead. And it still comes from this line. It is going to mess with our diagram a little bit, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and sweep. Sweep one. It's going to ask me for the sweep shape, which is that one. Enter. I bet. It's going to ask me for the rail first, so rail. It's going to ask me for the shape. Shape. Enter. Choose the direction. Usually I like to get this away from the point, by the way. Right? You don't usually want it to hit that same point. I usually kind of just put it somewhere else. Enter. And of course sweep it. So we get some pretty dang cool objects, right, to say the very least. Now it doesn't always work, especially if you have a crazy object like mine. But it made two, right? So, I mean, technically kind of interesting. Looks like it messed up on this one. Yeah, it didn't get that last piece. That's okay. Not every sweep works. Let's try again. We'll take that same one. I'll manipulate it a bit so I can take that point and that point. I don't know. Make it smaller. Bless you. Bless you. Let's try something a little smaller. So we'll take that one again. Sweep. It's going to ask for the shape. Enter. And that one worked out a little bit better. You guys see what I did there? Very interesting wall. But let's see how it looks against the grid. I don't know. I think I accidentally made like old school McDonald's going on here. So maybe not what I want. But again, this is kind of the point. I want you to test some things out. I want you to sculpt a little bit. I want you to go, nah, I don't like that, right? Because that just leads you to what you do want, right? But for the sake of tutorial, let's keep it. Because we don't have all the time in the world. I got plenty to get to. So I don't know, that's looking pretty sweet. I could potentially see how that could work. And yeah, that could potentially hold that up, even though that's kind of floating between these grids. And it's really encroaching on the grid a little bit too much. So again, even though I know it inspired from my diagram, we're breaking the diagram a little bit. You know what? The rules were meant to be broken. That's okay. Let's keep going though. Let's get at least one more piece in there. That way I can show you some more stuff. Let's take this object for instance. Now you may have noticed with the hatch you can't extrude it, right? You'll hit extrude and it's like, I need a curve, right? In fact, you may need to either redraw it, right? Or let's see if actually this command works. I think it's called generate boundary. It didn't work last time, but you know what? Let's try it again. Now, of course, spell boundary correct. It's not set boundary, it should be gen boundary, but they may have removed it or renamed it. I mean, it is Rhino 8, and that was a Rhino 7 thing. Not a big deal. We can take that piece, fake it till we make it, and we can make a new piece based on it. Boop. Boop. And of course, just use our guiding points like butter. But you could really get a new shape out of there. And extrude, I don't know. This could be like a horizontal plane, so we'll go with like 12 inches. And we'll cap it. And we'll get fancy with the spices. I don't know. Kind of just want some other elements that are involved. So I'm going to get my grid to kind of see what that maybe looks like. Okay. Okay. I'm going to copy it, get some rhythm going. You guys remember the organizing principles, don't you? The rhythm, the symmetry, the balance, all of it. But again, and get fancy with the spices. And of course now have this wonderful three-dimensional model. Even better, I can turn on the sun and we can really start to see what it looks like. Right, in terms of shade and shadow. And we could really start to show our professors, right, what we're thinking. Now, of course, mine's in the sky right now because I got a lot of stuff in this model. So let's hide that real quick. It'll always go to the lowest point of your model. So if your shadows aren't generating, it's usually because the ground surface has changed a little bit. But my God, that's graphics 2 in a nutshell right there. I know, you're all sick with me. But the computer is pretty amazing at what we do. But the only reason we know how to do it is because we've done it by hand. So keep that in mind. Those fundamentals are the exact same, even though they're going demonstrably much quicker in the computer. But pretty interesting. Relatively speaking, this is all we need for exercise 3. We need one perspective and one diagram. So as you can imagine, we're almost practically done with one iteration, but I want to get fancy, right? I want to show you that you actually have the ability to render in different colors, and you have the ability to actually show us different views. So stick with me, because this one is a little bit tricky. I would say, and disorienting. So we're going to type in camera. I'm going to stick with my parallel view. Let's see how it does today. I'm going to type in camera, and I'm going to hit show, because we want it to show the camera. So you may have noticed, as soon as that we look somewhere, you know, we see this kind of parallel box. In fact, it goes on technically at infinity. We don't see in parallel. You guys may have noticed that we have a vanishing point. We notice that even though something's really far away from us, it can appear small, but it doesn't necessarily mean it actually is small, right? Anyway, another thing that we can do, well, this is what is called as an orthogonal parallel view, which is why those lines of the cone are parallel. But if we switch to, say, a perspective, or a two-point perspective especially, it's going to turn into a cone. And in fact, I may need to refocus. And some of you guys may have realized, especially if you're taking graphics 2, hey, I've made that cone before, right? Going to the vanishing points, calculating your stationary point. It's literally all the exact same thing in a microsecond, right? But essentially, you just did the same thing per view. Now it's doing it thousands of views per second. Look at that. Psh, amazing, right? I love technology. Because now you actually start to understand what it's doing, right? But what's nice is we can control our stationary point. So if I want it to be lower towards the model, and as you can see, it immediately changes my view. So again, I want to express this to a client. I want to express this to my studio professor. And I definitely want to make it seem like, hey, I'm proposing an observation tower here. Does it make more sense to show a drone view? Nah. Or does it make more sense to show the exact view, that the height that I would be, right? 6-foot man, about 5'6" is where my eyes are. I could set it to 5.6. Bam! I can literally show you what it's going to look like before I spend a single dime, right? And that's really great because as architects, we definitely communicate those ideas to our clients, of course, our professors and our colleagues, right? But even then, I can still move things around, and as you can see, it moves down our cone, right? Another thing that we can control is the drama, as I like to say. And it won't let you do that if actually you have this in 2-point perspective. So what I need to do next is save that view. I think I did this actually in the previous tutorial. So we do need to set that view. We'll go to named views, and of course add a new view, and I'll call it iteration 1, and maybe view 1. Maybe I want to find some different views of this as well. So, or one view. There we go. View 1. There we go. Apply. And what's nice about that is even if I accidentally move it, I can double click and of course go to that exact view. But once I actually have that switched, I believe you can actually change your camera as well. Or I thought you could. Stay tuned. Sometimes it works for me, and sometimes I'm screen recording and things don't work, so I do apologize. I would say mess with the turning points. Let's see if this one actually works. No, the turning point's not even working, so I know it's my screen recording. Again, mess with your cone points and see what I mean, because definitely one starts to be super dramatic, and one starts to look like we're almost like with like a 50mm lens of like we're really far away and like zooming into our project. You can really start to get some kind of like distance effects when it comes to the camera. Actually, I kind of want to mess around with it because it does this all the time while I'm screen recording. I wonder if I turn the camera off and turn it back on. Let me just check real quick. So to turn the camera off, actually it's we can type in camera again and hide the camera. I kind of want to bring it back to see if the screen recording is just going nuts on me. And as you can imagine, when you type in camera in a certain viewport, it shows you that viewport, by the way. So now it's showing me my top view, right? I don't necessarily want that. So again, I need to click on the view that I want to show the camera, hit camera, and of course, as you can see, it's still stuck on top. So let's hide that real quick. I'll select this view, camera, and that's what I meant by a little disorienting. And of course, show. So now we got that camera back, double click, and again, set that right back. Gosh, why won't you move? Anyway, you should be able to move yours. But I want to know why. It always bugs me when I can't do stuff live. I like to do stuff live, and I don't know. I think it's kind of nice to see that I mess up too and how to fix it, right? Because you're going to mess up too. Nobody's ever going to do this all perfect in one shot. But as you can see, we can really, and you can almost get like the Matrix effect going on there. I mean, we could start to set up animations, and imagine if you've ever worked for Pixar or an animation studio, we mess with cameras like all the time, right, when it comes to these things. But for the sake of tutorial, that's looking pretty good. Let's move on to some materials. So it didn't look like it worked out for me, but that's okay. We got our view. Let's maybe get back to that view. Double click, nailed it. Oops, I accidentally changed my other view. It's okay. You can go back to set view and go back to top. Not a big deal. In my case, the camera is kind of dangerous there, so I'm going to turn it off. And we'll go ahead and hide it. Next thing, let's start to get fancy with some materials. I mean, don't get me wrong, this looks nice, but it's kind of hard to see like what's going on and to look at the materials precisely. I also have some really good examples of some of those projects as well, and I'll probably show you tomorrow. But I usually don't like to put the examples in the videos themselves. So let's take these objects. I don't know. What are you thinking? Red? I like red. I'll stick to some sort of color scheme. Keep in mind, I don't necessarily want to make materials yet, but I do want to differentiate and start to make a diagrammatic model for this abstract sculpture. So in my case, I'm going to go to my properties. It looks like a little color wheel. This will be based off of what I've selected, by the way. So keep in mind, I've saved my view, so it's okay if I kind of move it around, but be careful, 2-point perspective is weird. So let's go back to, I don't know, some sort of regular view. Perspective is good too, but I like the orthogonal. I'm just old school. But for the sake of this, we want to select what we want to potentially change. So let's say I wanted to select those and select those. Doesn't really matter, but I'm going to basically hit this little paint tube, and if you hover over it, it says material. Now, awesome enough, it comes with a lot of materials. So if you click on user, there's actually, anything that you've done in previous, right? So I've started a new file, so I don't have anything but my default materials. You can click on this little plus sign, and let's face it, it's got a lot, right? So we got glass, we got gem, emissions, and these are all kind of like presets, but I don't recommend them. In fact, what kind of stinks about them is as soon as I select one of these presets, it's kind of locked into that certain type. So even if I do want to change it or kind of change the look, I literally have to make a whole new material just to make glass. And let's face it, there's 15 different ways to make glass. Very often what I do is actually select plastic. It's easier on my CPU and GPU, and it looks nice, right? So I'm going to select plastic. It also gives me a couple of options. So even if I did want to make it look like glass, I can give it some transparency. Right? And as you can see, it immediately changes that preview. And I can immediately see what it looks like in shade and shadow, by the way, too, which is a game changer, right? However, I can also change the color to say like a red. I can get rid of some of that transparency because maybe I don't want glass. Maybe I just want kind of a red, nice plasticky look, right? Some nice shade and shadow. And again, I may need to deselect that element to kind of see it. Already right there, starting to pop a lot better, right? We start to see some of the specular highlights, and yeah, for the lack of a better sense, it looks like red plastic, right? We can click on that object again, and what's kind of nice is now when I click on another object and I hit this layer, there's that layer I made. So immediately I can change some other things. Now, I wouldn't get all fancy and suddenly make the rainbow going on, because that would be distracting and possibly actually distract what I'm trying to say or communicate. So again, I want to use color effectively. Arguably, I would say try not to go past 3 colors, but let's face it, you guys all do. Have fun with it, to say the very least. But maybe I want to make those materials first. So I don't know, maybe I want a green or a blue. So plus sign. Now, there are a couple of options, and to be fair, you can test some of these out. I mean, I don't know everything in the world. But if you wanted to, say, have a picture of concrete, you could, right? If you wanted a picture of steel, you could, right? So there is a picture option. If I wanted to show, say, I don't know, maybe I was doing a museum and I wanted to show a painting of Mona Lisa, I would just change the material to Mona Lisa and change that square. Suddenly I've got the Mona Lisa in my drawing or my 3D model. Now, obviously we're not doing that for this project, but clearly you can see where the potential is going.
So you can just like look up like a texture of concrete and then just upload it.
Precisely. Where was I? Oh yeah, let's make another material. And again, I'm just trying to show you a plethora of what we can do. So let's go with paint is another good one. Very simple, and again, it just changes color. Let's do another one. Metal is another good one. And what's kind of nice about that is we can control the reflectivity, and it does kind of have a more metallic look. I may want to do that for my grids, right? So I'm going to actually go back to my layers. I'm going to turn everything off but grids. Switch to grids real quick. I'm going to take all my grids. Boop. I'm going to change that layer at once, right? So I'm going to go to my properties, layer tool. Let's go to a metal. Kind of like that metal look going on. You can zoom in, and as you can see, it really has like a metallic-y look to it. Be very careful, because that's only like super polished metal. There is no metal in real life. I mean, this was kind of the biggest statement against the Cybertruck, is like, dude, it's not always going to be clean. And there's a reason we switched from steel, because it's a lot harder to bend when you crash, right? And you see all the defects in steel when it's bumpy, right? However, we can switch it to something more like a silver grayscale, and you'll notice even the colors switch to something that's more like metal palette, right? So you can go to platinum, gold, copper, chrome, bronze, brass. I kind of like the brass, but we'll go with like a silver or like a titanium, just because it starts to look a little bit more like steel. And obviously, I'll turn down the reflectivity a lot, right? So of course you can change that. And it's starting to look a little bit more softer and look a little bit more like steel. So again, I'm not trying to say that you can't use real materials for this project, but I would say be careful. It's really easy to make something look quite chaotic and ugly by simply just adding too many different material types to it. But it's starting to look pretty good, if I do say so myself. But we can essentially turn these back on and really start to get somewhere. Now, Obviously, it changed all the other metal items. So again, maybe I want to switch this to kind of a blue plastic because I want to show them off against that red color. Everybody knows that the opposite of green is red and the opposite of red is green, at least in a light sense. So I don't know, maybe I go with a green, a soft green. Very often green represents trees or foliage, so I don't want to get too green. So I'll go with a plastic, kind of a dark green, I don't know, just kind of a slight green if you will. Apply. We could take obviously off a lot of that reflectivity, and I could even take off the clarity. We're starting to get kind of like a hard Gumby plastic in there. Right? You guys know Gumby? Does that show my age? I'm sorry. I used to watch Gumby as like a 5-year-old. So, but already right there, we're getting way better. But that's not the view that we want. We kind of maybe want to test it in the view that we actually had. So we'll go back to our camera, double click, voila. I'm not a huge fan anymore, but that's okay. For the sake of the diagram, and at least so we can end part 1, and keep in mind part 2 of exercise 3 will be about Illustrator a little bit, so a little bit of a recap there. Obviously, I want to make my diagram, so I'll make 2D, or I'll type in show to bring back everything that I had. And maybe we make 2D this one, even though it is already 2D. I usually flatten stuff just in case. That, and it actually changes our layer. So there you go, we have our diagram, but obviously as you can see I could probably just keep that one for the sake. I also already have my 11 by 17, so why work harder when you can work smarter? I'm going to take my original 11 by 17, copy, and set up our new page. Right? Obviously I need a diagram, so I'm going to take my diagram, and I need to do this for 3 models, guys. Do keep that in mind. No scale here, at least not yet. And I need my view, right? So I'm gonna hide some other things, and let's get that view. Oop, man, I really gotta get this one out of the way. Right, I don't wanna see it in there. Also, I might need to hide it, because as you can see, it's like floating, because it's going based off of the lowest element. You'll notice if I raise this, now this is the lowest element. Does that make sense, guys? Again, why some of our stuff looks like it's floating in rendered view. I don't know, that took me a long time to realize, like, what's controlling that? So double click, take everything, make 2D. Gosh, this would have been great in Boguslav's graphics too, no? Hit make 2D. Oh man, I even have a hidden line option. And again, for some of us who have noticed that like the lines fall off the curves, make sure you click tangent edges. That's what's gonna grab some of that extra geometry information. So we'll hit apply. Man, I love it. Gosh, I wish I knew how to do that back in the day.
I think you grabbed the bottom one, but it doesn't.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Ah, my bad. Yeah, you don't really want that one in here, but for the sake of tutorial, you know, it's okay. But yeah, thank you for, Gavin just noticed that the bottom diagram was still there. We don't want that part. So we'll take that piece. And this is where we want to get a little fancy with the rendering. Now, obviously I'll continue this in part 2. But there's a little bit more that we can do for this rendering. You'll notice that there's this blue ball, and if you hover over it, it's the rendering and the toggle render options. So if we right click on that, it brings up this wonderful gigantic window of options for rendering, which in itself could take, honestly, we could do like a week on just rendering stuff and show you all the different things that we can do. Because what it's trying to do is model real life. And if you don't understand reality, that there's dithering, that there's atmospheric effects, that there's refraction going on, that there's all a chromic, like if any photographers out there, do you know what a chromic refraction is, where you get kind of these rainbows that come off of certain materials and elements?
Oh,
There is just
aberration?
chromatic aberration. Sorry, like I sound like Scooby-Doo right now, but that's a hard one for me to say. But yes, right, all of that stuff has a scientific calculation behind it, right? And what's wonderful is this computer, this program is doing all those calculations for us and giving us some sort of preview of what it is trying to mimic reality, right? So don't get me wrong. The more we start to understand about our world and our reality, the more you can start to implicate those things in a digital realm. And I find that connection to be absolutely fascinating. And of course, the goal, right? Because as architects, we don't just want to design in imagination land. Eventually, we want to make this reality. right? We want to show what that metal is going to look like in 20 years. We want to show our clients what that metal looks like next to the wood, right? And those kinds of things. So again, using these programs as necessary. But just to kind of give a brief description, obviously we have our tabs. I'm going to go ahead and close them now so that I can just kind of open one at a time and kind of break that down. We don't even use the last one, by the way. But as you can see, tons of options. The first one, Rhino Render or Rhino Legacy. Legacy is the old render, but if you notice your computer's struggling, now you shouldn't struggle on the school computers, but if you notice your laptop is struggling, go with the Legacy. That one will work. It'll be a little different quality, but it'll produce a little bit better. However, if you got a pretty strong computer, Rhino Render is definitely good to go. The view is what is actually controlled here. So you'll notice if I go to specific viewport, right, I can actually select the top view or iteration view layer. And again, that's basically selecting those viewports. So even though I'm not even looking at that viewport, I can actually render another view, right? Not necessarily the one that's right in front of me, but I'll select that one. Resolution and quality. I don't know about you, but old school screen TVs were 640 by 480. We want quality here. We want HD. We want 4K, 2K, 8K now. Is there a 16K? It's probably coming soon. But I know 8K is probably the biggest one that we have. We can go to 4K. I don't recommend it because it'll take forever. That's a lot more pixels, right? And that's a lot more calculations. So again, it's going to take longer the larger that the quality is. So for instance, for today, I'm just going to use the same as my viewport, which is this right here, this little white box. And right now it's telling me that it's 948 by 1016. It's not bad. It's a decent image. It's not HD of any kind, but it will do fine for what we need. If I was actually going to use it for my Illustrator project though, I'd probably want to go HD and go with at least like a full HD or 2K, right? Even QHD. Some of these are probably familiar if you've ever had a biased television screen or a monitor. You definitely see all these things and you start to really get used to these kind of call outs. But what's nice is it's the same thing. It's a pixel definition. But in our case, let's go for speed today. So I'm just going to go with viewport. I'm going to go with draft or good quality. Let's face it, for the final, you probably want final draft quality so that it does all the calculations really nice. But for today, we'll go with good quality. Background, my goodness, this is where it gets fun, right? I mean, you can go with a red background, you can go with anything. Most of us sometimes need a black background to remove it or a white background to remove it. There is also an option to make it transparent. You can also do a gradient, right? I mean, there's just so many options in that arguably I may want to use to show my client, right? For instance, maybe the background is a Google Street View of this building in the spot that it needs to be. So again, there's a lot of options there. What is that?
You can put an image.
You can put an image in here as well, with the wallpaper, right? And of course, you can switch it to whatever you want. In my case, I'm just going to go with a solid background for today. And again, so that it produces a little easier. To be fair, there's also environments, right? So if you click an environment and you go to plus and you go to import from environment library, it comes with a bunch of them in Rhino that are just fantastic. And I think actually if you hit spacebar, at least on the Mac, it'll show you a little preview of each one and what that background or that environment entails and what it does to our materials. So environment has a lot to do with how a material looks, no? Have you ever had, I don't know, my wife's a beautician, so it's so funny. They have really good lighting in their salon. Why?
See lights.
So that you don't go outside and go, oh crap, that's a different color, right? Of course, we do the exact same thing in architecture. And let's face it, we mostly use the sun. Why? Because we don't build buildings inside other buildings, right? We don't have to worry about artificial light. We worry about actually what sunlight looks like, what our architecture looks like at midnight, what our architecture looks like in the morning versus the evening, right? So again, trying to match reality. But again, some really cool tools here that are obviously presets. My favorite to use are definitely the studios. So like Studio A, which I think I actually have it set on right now. And there's actually a couple studios, so let me put that in a actually order. But yeah, there's a bunch of studios in there. Very similar to, you know, setting up your model and taking a picture of it. But let's go with, I don't know, Studio E for Escamilla, right? Really changes the background, right? You start to even get the highlight there, but keep in mind it will start to change your shadows, so be careful, right? it does govern a lot of the global aspects of the render and the drawing. But again, this is just a recap. We'll get into the thick of it on part 2. Ground plane, that's a pretty simple one. It's either on or off, and as you can see, if it's off, it doesn't produce shadows on the bottom. You can also change the 360 environment, and you can have a transparent background as well. So like if you were to Photoshop this and you're gonna put in your own background anyway, you'd wanna check transparent background. Obviously we can get into the lighting, which also has a studio effect, so you can even change that, but obviously we can change the intensity and everything in between. And for the most part, these last 4, I don't even touch them. They're so advanced and you won't even need them in architecture school. However, to be fair, if you ever want to become a game designer, those 4 at the bottom are definitely start to be a little bit more important as you start to deal with frame rates and you deal with certain megabyte, anyway, dithering, whole nother subject in itself. But to render it, instead of right-clicking on that blue box, we'll just click the blue box. We'll click it. It'll bring up a separate window, and it'll essentially stitch together, in my case, 500 different shots. Now it's stitching that together pretty fast. I have a pretty good computer. It did it in 8 seconds, but it basically put up 500 images and smushed it into one, and we have this wonderful drawing that now, if I zoom in onto, actually looks pretty bad, right? So I'd probably want to choose a higher resolution, right? Because that'll definitely affect it. Or I would choose final quality instead of just good quality, right? Because, you know, there is a difference there. And let me show you what I mean. So notice how fast that went, 8 seconds, compared to, let's see, let's go with 4K. Let's go with final quality. Let's go ahead and render.
I bet these printers right here probably won't be able to print that good quality though, right?
You would eventually exceed the quality, right? Because that's only 600 DPI.
Yeah.
So, I mean, keep in mind, that's pretty good though. I mean, I don't even know if you can produce an image at 600 DPI. But as you can see, it's going through 1,500 shots, and it's taking significantly longer, right? And that's because of the quality. I set it to final quality, and obviously it's a much bigger image, right? So you'll see what I mean by this when we zoom in now. Holy we can really get close. Now you'll notice, especially we go through these shots, that'll start to get a little cleaner. Right? You guys see that? It's kind of those pixels getting better and better. So it's doing the ray tracing, it's doing all kinds of work. But as you can see, it definitely produces arguably a clearer image. And you'll notice there's kind of this like glow around it. That's the reflectivity of my material. So again, you start to really understand what materials do, right? Especially when you can test it, especially when you don't have to pay for materials. Can't tell you how many times I've been like, all right, I made this thing out of gold. Oh shit, wait, I can't actually make this in real life. That would cost like $24,000, right? So it's very easy to get kind of lost in a Sims world. I don't know about you, if you ever played Sims back in the day, but you type in the cheat code Rosebud and you would like max out and just make a really cool house, only to realize like, oh man, it's just a digital realm. That would actually be a lot to afford, right? But as you can see, much longer. We're already at 1 minute and 43 seconds, and I'm running out of small talk for this one. So clearly, I've got the point across. It comes out a lot better, right? Obviously using higher resolution and of course, better quality. But as you can see, once it's done, it'll freeze. No, I'm just kidding. You'll hit save, and we could turn it into a JPEG, PNG. I don't think we have PDF. Oh, what the hell's a Rhino rendered image? That's new. Anyway, obviously I would save it to a PNG, and we'll call it test image, just to make sure that it did the things that we wanted. Another thing is it's kind of has like a built-in Photoshop. So I mean, there are some other plugins and post tools. I won't necessarily ever go over that because we use a better program called Adobe Photoshop. However, it is kind of nice that it's kind of built in there, so potentially if you had a computer that didn't have Photoshop, you could still technically work it. So, however, that's about a lot for today. So just to recap, we went over the basic instructions. So of course I'll show everything back again. And we'll make that a little bit smaller. We'll keep the same proportions. After all, I do need to make 3 of them. So I'll produce 1, produce 2, and produce 3. Technically, I could get really kind of work smarter, not harder, and I just wanted to express this. I can use the exact same model, guys, and now just go, well, what if the grids were over here? See what I'm saying? So you don't necessarily have to like rework from scratch every single time. It could be this slight iteration of literally the same one. So do keep that in mind, especially if you're pressed for time, and it's not due till next Wednesday. So we do have a lot more time on this one, obviously to allow for some of that, and of course for Team 8 to, of course, start designing, right? But just wanted to get that point across. Obviously, we went over some array tools, we went over divide tools, we went over some different ways to extrude, cap, solidify, all those kinds of things. We definitely went over the fact that we want this to be sculptural, right? We're not necessarily making an observation tower yet, but we're getting there, right? But we need some sort of abstract model in order to do so. Last but not least, we went over the camera and, of course, the basics over Rhino rendering. So, nice recap. Any major questions, guys, or maybe something that came up that you'd like to get on the video? Any questions about the assignment itself? Does everybody know what to do? 3 iterations, especially if you're B team. And A team, I've got a site plan for you. So you're definitely welcome to get started. Some of us have already been there, but I'd be glad to take you over there. You're probably familiar with the project. I'll keep it off the recording, but I can go over that if you want to stick around for a little while. Sound good? Otherwise, we're done for the day. I'll see you tomorrow.